Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar titled National Service in the New Normal, a webinar on NSTP remote teaching and learning. Thank you so much for being here, dear attendees from all around the Philippines. I saw participants from the northern to the southern parts of the Philippines. In behalf of Chancellor Fidel Nimento, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs Maria Teresa Payongayong, and the NSTP Diliman Council, I welcome you to this webinar. In a matter of months, this pandemic has challenged a lot of our traditional educational ways that seemingly are unresponsive to the needs of the time. Some of you, NSTP implementers, were left with a decision to solve the issues on your own. You might have asked yourself, how will the spirit of the NSTP be preserved in this new remote teaching and learning format? Or are we doing a disservice to the program if we are only going to expect the minimum from our students? We at UP could honestly tell you that we have the same concerns. We have our own what ifs too. But we are also able to translate these apprehensions into exciting opportunities. Right now, the NSTP Diliman Extended Council, composed of eager and able coordinators and instructors from various colleges and units in the university, has embarked into a course redesign of our once residentially delivered NSTP 1 and 2 courses. I am happy to tell everyone that we are nearing the end of the online write shops. Allow me also to share with you some of our exciting news. The office is beefing up learning resources and knowledge products that would help our community of implementers teach NSTP for the next semesters. Together with TVUP, UP's Internet TV network, the office has embarked on a project that would allow our office to produce content that would be useful not only for UP Diliman instructors, but also to our larger community of NSTP implementers. So please do watch out for the unveiling of these knowledge products soon. Moreover, the partnerships that were started by the NSTP office's former director Arlene Macapinlac and Deputy Director Joe Santos with DZUP and the core of sponsors of our very own UPROTC in an NSTP program called Servisyong Tatak UP allowed us to have a pool of resources that could be used by our teachers as learning materials for their NSTP 1 classes. You may use these materials too if you like. Just visit the NSTP Diliman website at nstp.upd.edu.ph and look for the episodes under the STUP. Today, the office offers another necessary effort to provide additional solutions to the teaching and learning of NSTP during these trying times. We have invited Professor Ria May Borromeo, the Director of the Information and Communication Technology Development Office of the UP Open University, and Ms. Ana Maria Raimundo, a development sector professional, to share with us how to prepare NSTP implementers for the teaching in a remote setup. They would tackle how to create projects and initiatives in online settings too. So we hope that they could share with all of us some of the important points that would further deepen your knowledge and skills on the teaching of NSTP and guide you in choosing appropriate projects. As a national university, UP would like to extend all the help it could provide to NSTP implementers from all around the country. So thank you so much for being here. Your presence means a lot to all of us. Have a nice day. Our first lecturer is Ria May Borromeo, a full-time faculty at the University of the Philippines Open University, or the UPOU, where she teaches computer science and information systems courses. She is currently the director of the Information and Communication Technology Development Office. She earned a PhD degree in engineering from Keio University, Tokyo, Japan in 2017, and a master's degree in engineering from the same university in 2011. She also worked as a software engineer in NEC Telecom Software Philippines right after obtaining a bachelor's degree from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, where she graduated in 2006. Her research interests include crowdsourcing, data engineering, knowledge discovery in databases, and educational technologies. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Ria May Borromeo.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Ria Maybor Mayo, and I've been teaching at the UP Open University for about 8 years. In the UP Open University, all our classes are done online. And we've been doing our NSTP course online as well. So in my talk, I will share briefly how we do remote learning, how we do remote teaching and learning, and also share how we implemented CWTS 1 and 2 as an online course. So remote teaching, maybe you have already experienced this as we prepare for the coming semester. But the bulk of remote teaching, as I've experienced before, is mostly in the preparation. We prepare the course guide, the course materials, learning activities, and also setting up the classroom whether it's an online classroom or a semi-online classroom. And this takes a lot of our efforts and our time. So the bulk is really in the preparation. I hope we're all almost done with this. And the easy part, but the good thing is when you've done the preparation already, the 10% is in the management. So when the school year starts, when the semester starts, you will just be monitoring your classes and interacting with students and supporting them, especially at this time. And then another major activity that we do is the evaluation. How do we evaluate our class and the computation of the grades? So I'll briefly discuss these three parts. In the preparation, we have to consider the content, the delivery mode, the technologies that we are going to use, the learning resources, how the assessment, and the learning activities. Examples of output include the outline or the study guide with your schedule, the requirements, grading system, the learning materials, learning activities, and the classroom setup in a given platform. So this is really quite challenging, the preparation, but we can do this all. And then the content is just to give more details. The content is based on the curriculum and the course outline. The delivery mode, you have to think whether it's synchronous or asynchronous. And the learning resources are carefully selected materials based on the course learning outcomes. Examples are video lectures, lecture slides, podcasts, plain text, or we also have to consider the use of open educational resources or copyrighted materials, or do we make our own? And the technologies that we will use. Uh, Commonly, we use learning management systems such as Moodle, Google Classroom, and Canvas. Advanced in other courses, they use the virtual reality as well. And some technologies also involve simple ones such as pen and paper, old mobile phones, telephones for those who do not have access to the internet or other technologies. We also have to consider how we assess the performance of students based on the learning activities and how to prevent cheating, which is really challenging in an online setting. Learning examples of learning activities include assignments, quizzes, group reporting, discussion forums. So when you choose learning activities, we really have to think of our desired learning outcomes. And a very, very important thing that we should never forget is to give very specific instructions and guidelines. So let's keep the instructions clear and easy to understand, so to avoid confusion, especially if we're distributing our materials in text and we have to mail them, and that's the only guide that our students will have. The instructions and the guidelines should be very clear and easy to understand. Now, so that's just a brief introduction on how we do remote teaching. But how do we do remote teaching for NSTP? And I personally have not taught NSTP in UPOU. I've been teaching computer science courses, but I've asked my colleagues on how this was implemented. And I was also quite impressed because I was wondering how do we do NSTP in an online setting? So, um, we only offer one NSTP, and it's CWTS. So there are two courses, CWTS1 and CWTS2. CWTS1, maybe it's the same for all others, but this is the lecture part of the course, and or the introduction to the community service. And um, so this is just there's still no immersion to the community for CWTS1. In the CWTS1 course in UPOU, there's a course outline at the start of the given to the students, and the delivery mode is asynchronous. Mostly, we don't do synchronous lectures in the UP Open University because it's more flexible. The asynchronous is more flexible, and some of our students are working students or in different time zones. So asynchronous lectures or delivery mode work better. Um, the learning resources that we give to students are lecture slides or handouts prepared by the lecturer, or references readings from published articles or books. And then we set up a classroom in the learning management system. Our learning management system is based on Moodle. And then the assessment is based on the learning activities for, for the course. So in NSTP, CWTS1, the following are the learning activities done. So first is the participation in online discussion and peer feedback, and then reflection papers. There are also quizzes because there are lectures, and also a final exam. So this is an example of what the entire course would look like. So on the left, you will see the topic, and then on the right are the activities for those topics. So for the introduction, you have the introduction to CWTS, getting to know CWTS1 and the community. And as an activity, the student should participate in a forum where he or she would introduce himself or herself, and then a forum with me and my community. Like there will be a prompt asking you to describe your community. Sorry if you can hear the thunder. I'm a bit distracted, but I hope you can still hear me clearly. Anyway, uh, and then there's also a quiz and a reflection paper for the for the introduction part. The reflection paper is an assignment that the student has to create and submit to the submission bean in the platform. And then for the next topic, perspectives of citizenship throughout time, there's a forum, and community citizenship and civic engagement. There's a quiz. Working with community, there's a quiz and a reflection paper. Reflecting on community and service and volunteerism, there's a forum and another reflection paper. And the last topic, gearing towards community service, there is another forum. I forgot to put in there, there's also a final exam, and the students are required to complete these things. In the forums, they are evaluated by their participation. So if they participated, they already have, they don't get the specific grades for for the exact content. So it's too difficult for the teacher to grade the forum posts. But the participation is what matters here. If the student participated in the forum. And then the quizzes, if there are objective quizzes, they are easy to grade because they can be automatically graded by the platform. And the reflection papers could be group works wherein they can work in groups and have one output for this. So this is how CWTS1 uh, is implemented in UPOU. This is quite simple. I think this is a bit simpler than CWTS1 because mostly they are lectures, and you don't really have to to go out of your community yet. So this is just lectures and like our other classes. Now, how about CWTS2? Here, the students have to go out to the community and really serve. And the learning activities or requirements here are the following. So there is a community service plan, a community service hours or output, documentation of community service, monitoring sheets or attendance logs, reflective essays, and certificate of participation or letter of certification. Now, these are done in groups, and so at the beginning, the students will be grouped together, and they will think of a community service plan, and then the teacher will then meet individually with the groups and approve the or evaluate the community service plan for approval. So here there are things to consider such as the safety of the plan, ethics, or the feasibility as well. So those are things to consider when approving the community service plan. And the second one, the service hours or output, are a documentation monitoring sheets are for monitoring of the teachers on the status of the students' community service. There are community service tracks that we have as well for that the students can choose. So the students are free to choose what type of community service they will embark on. So these are the tracks, and we partner with institutions for these tracks. So there are literacy and numeracy, environment welfare, music and visual art, pangkabuhayan and livelihood, sports and fitness, computer graphics and literacy, volunteerism, nutrition, health and wellness, disaster relief operations, and online volunteerism, and others. If the students wants to do something else, they are free to do it. They just have to propose the community service plan for the approval of the teacher. So now that it's quite difficult to go out in the real world, maybe it's not too safe to go out. There are online community service opportunities that that are available, and these are just some examples that I've personally tried, but I'm not sure yet if this will work for students, because these are individual. The first two are individual group online community service opportunities. So first one is the Kindi. You can try this. So it connects students to a network of virtual reading volunteers. To volunteer here, you will be connected to someone, and then the one you are connected to is not very good in English, for example, and then that student will practice reading with you, and then you will correct the reading of that student. So that's how this platform works. And then there's this Crowd for You. The Crowd for You is like a micro volunteering platform where there are many types of tasks, such as this was used once for disaster response. Like they took images of all flooded areas, and then in Crowd for You, you can identify if an image is flooded or not. And in return, you can help like the institution who posted that task to know where to go to give relief um, to such places. And there are also other volunteer opportunities that I saw, the volunteermatch.org and ivolunteer.com.ph. So that's for CWTS. That's how we did it how we do it in UPOU. This semester, I think it will be the same it will be generally the same, except that the community service plan uh, will be evaluated uh, more on the safety. So there will be higher consideration for the safety and the feasibility of the community service plan that the students will propose for CWTS2 in this time. And how do we do this for military science and literacy training service? That For literacy training service, I think this is quite easier to implement. You will have like the lecture part or the theoretical part in LTS 1 and then the project implementation part in LTS 2. I'm just really not sure about military science. Maybe we can teach something else like preparing for cyber warfare or something like that. I'm not really sure yet, but we can all think about this, and we can all take this opportunity to be creative on how to implement the NSTP in our universities. So that's all. Thank you very much. Your references, and that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Borromeo. So as we continue with the second lecture, I would like to introduce our second lecturer. Ana Marie Raimundo is the development sector professional, and she spent almost 6.5 years working at the Department of Social Welfare and Development for the Sustainable Livelihood Component or Program. Part of her work included partnership building with civic society organization and the academe. She has worked with the Ateneo de Manila University's Office of Social Concern and Involvement for their NSTP program. In 2014, she also worked with or co-wrote with paper entitled Collective Impact Through Service Learning, Discipline-Based Approaches and Civic Engagement. Examples of the Ateneo de Manila University's service learning and discipline-based engagements with government institutions and their programs, which was presented at the second Summit on University Social Responsibility cum inaugural International Conference on Service Learning in Hong Kong. So currently, Anna is completing her master's degree in public administration at the New York University. So friends, as all welcome, Miss Ana Maria Raimundo.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Anna, and I'll be speaking today about community engagement through remote initiatives. Next slide, please. So, just to give a coverage of the topics I'll be covering for today, we'll be talking about one, converting in person to remote projects. The second is identifying new remote projects. The third is in managing remote projects. And the fourth is well, I'll be giving you some examples of potential remote projects and topics. So, just to give you a little more context, I understand that many of us have adjusted to this new setup of switching from in person to remote. So, personally, for me, the experience that I've had with this was in the previous semester. I was currently still in New York. We were working on volunteer month. So in the US, they don't have what we have as an NSTP format. Instead, they have other initiatives like volunteer month. So we've had to take it from in-person volunteering work through to online volunteering. So that's sort of the immediate experience that I've seen in shifting projects from in person to remote. But I will also be covering other ways that students can be engaged. Universities can help students be more involved with civic engagement and nation building. Next slide, please. So the main coverage, as I've mentioned earlier, will be different topics, but I will talk about them in the context of sort of a checklist. So this checklist hopefully will be able to help you in planning out your respective modules and your syllabus for NSTP this coming semester. So first, I'll be covering on the checklist will be setting the parameters. The second one will be in choosing projects. The third is on articulating desired outcomes and who will be involved in articulating that. And the fourth one will be on project monitoring. Next slide, please. So the first one is on setting the parameters. So as NSTP instructors and organizers, the first thing that we have to decide on is identifying if we want to convert existing in-person projects into remote, or second, identifying new remote projects, so completely from scratch. Or the third one is having a combination of both. So what does this mean? If you already have, let's say, an existing module or an existing community that you want to work on, and you need to convert it from in-person to online or remote, and then the other option is if you are willing to, or if you have no current partner organization or project that you're working on, or if you want to marry both kinds of projects. Next slide, please. So converting in-person to remote. So what if you already have a partner community or organization, or what if you already have existing modules? So in this case, what we have to look at is, okay, what of our previous NSTP modules are current, or do we really want to use? Or what of who among our partners are still open to engaging with us in the coming semester, even if it will be remote, even if it will mean that students will be unable to visit their location or meet them in person. Next slide, please. So if we are looking at existing materials, let's say we already have modules, diba? So what we have to understand, or what we have to consider, is how we switch from manual to digital. So what materials or software or online platforms can be used to digitize existing projects? So as I mentioned earlier, the first thing that we really should be starting on is looking at what we already have. Diba? Hindi naman kailangan yung completely from scratch doon tayo pupulot or mag-iisip ng project. Ano ba doon sa mga existing materials natin, yung literally manual, pero baka naman pwede natin siyang gawing digital. Pag sinabi nating digital, hindi lang siya basta available online, but ano ba yung ibang platforms? So for example, kung module ba siya, meron ba tayong mga module na pwedeng i-develop into a video? So instructional video siya imbis na binabasa. O kaya baka naman meron tayong mga ginagamit na other modes of instruction na pwede nating i-access or gamitin. So nabanggit kanina ni Professor Borromeo na Google Classroom is one of the common means na ginagamit. So maybe there are other existing modules that we can transfer in Google Classroom. And I think what's nice about Google Classroom right now is that they're also expanding their services. So one thing that I would recommend is, if Google Classroom yung ginagamit nyo currently with your students, or yung gagamitin ninyo, is to explore the other additional functions that they have been providing or will be providing. So baka some of those might work for you and your students. Next slide, please. So what if naman, diba, wala kang partner community or organization, or open kayo mag-extend ng additional communities or organizations? Where should you begin, and who should choose the project? With this one, what we really also have to consider is being able to reimagine the kind of work that we do now. Understandably, circumstances are different from what we are used to. But that also means, in a positive light, na we can actually rethink the way we do civil service, diba? This is another opportunity where students can be more involved pa din. Next slide, please. So what can we do? kung yung dating NSTP na ginagawa natin is really, pag sinabi natin community engagement, is something that's more area-based or location-based, di ba? Meron siyang specific site, pupunta yung students doon, doon sila mag-i-immerse. Another way that we can reimagine when community engagement is looking at it in another light. What other definitions does community have? And one thing is that looking at community as a group of people, of persons, of individuals who have a common history, common identity, or even common interests, di ba? So, pwede siyang interest groups. Sila din community. Hindi man sila in the same physical space, but because of certain commonalities that they have, they can be considered a community. For example, a community of individuals who identify as part of the LGBTQI+, a community of individuals who believe in a certain cause, a community of teachers. So rather than something na geographic, pwede rin natin tignan ito as something that holds people together. So one way that we can look at it is that hindi na lang siya necessarily yung pupuntahan ng students, pero yung pwedeng makausap ng mga students or matulungan ng mga students na hindi siya bound ng in that specific location. Next slide, please. So, one thing that we can look at, like I said, is if community is not bound by location and community is something that we can look at based on common history or common identity, then we can try to build a sense of community engagement for students na mas malapit sa role nila, mas malapit sa current skills and interests nila. And one way is through looking at NSTP as a form of service learning. So I'm sure some of us have already used service learning before. Some of us are practicing it or probably just don't use the term. Or maybe for some of us, it's a new term. So essentially, what is service learning? So it's integrating public service with a specialization or areas of interest by providing meaningful opportunities for community engagement. So simply put, we apply theory into practice, diba? So one of the ways that we can look at NSTP is through service learning such that kung ano yung natututunan nila sa classroom, kung ano yung current program nila or interests, pwede nilang i-apply sa context ng public service, sa context ng citizen participation and nation building. Next slide, please. So, Vanderbilt University would define service learning as a form of experiential education where learning occurs through a cycle of action and reflection as students seek to achieve real objectives for the community and deeper understanding and skills for themselves. So tulad nga ng nabanggit kanina ni Professor Borromeo, one of the aspects that they've incorporated in the UP system is having reflection papers, which I'm sure many other universities have. So in the exercise of service learning, ganun pa din siya. Meron tayong ginagawa for the community, pero tinitingnan natin, binabalikan natin, okay, ano ba yung mga reflection ko or ano ba yung mga natutunan ko or ano yung main takeaway ko from this entire experience. But yung pinaka-input ng students or yung pinaka-activities are based on something that is related to their respective programs or interests. So kunyari, pwede rin siya in the context of students na may, kunyari, student group or student organization. So pwede siyang in the lens of yung special interests nila aside from their respective academic programs. Next slide, please. So similarly, the University of Washington would define it the same way. The next one is selecting allowable online platforms. So pag sinabi nating allowable online platforms, what I mean by this is magandang manggaling sa mga teachers or instructors, ano ba yung pwede nilang gamitin. Siguro, dati, meron tayong mga website na perhaps hindi natin na-utilize in the context of education. Now that we're in the digital space, now that everyone is on remote learning, perhaps we can explore using them and seeing how they can be part of the learning experience of students. Next slide, please. So what are examples of these online platforms? Next slide, please. So for example, perhaps it can be projects on that are visible on podcasts. So later on, I'll share examples of what projects can be used through the use of podcasts. Some of them might be in the form of being able to upload YouTube videos. Some of them might even be using or optimizing the features of Facebook. Some might even be on Tableau. Um, some might be on educational platforms like Google Classroom or Canva. So for example, itong presentation ko this afternoon, I was able to use I was able to make using Canva. So for those who are unfamiliar, Canva is a website that allows people to make communication materials, to make posters, to make um, presentations using different graphics that are available. So Canva actually has an education feature. So you might want to explore if you have an email address that is tied to your university. They also have that feature so that you can access different components of Canva. Another one is using Python, which is also an open source software, or Tableau. Tableau is a data visualization application or software that also gives a special education feature. So kunyari gusto nyo siyang gamitin or students want to use that, with the education email address, you would be able to access that for free as well. So when I say allowable online platforms, it's you who are identifying, okay, ano ba yung pwedeng gamitin or ano ba yung i-allow ko na parameters for children, for the students to use. So if some of these platforms were probably underutilized or not used at all before, perhaps, as I've mentioned, you might want to explore using them in the context of NSTP. Next slide, please. So the third one, which is very important, is enlisting inputs and resources. Next slide, please. So what skills and abilities could students contribute? And what materials, equipment, and other resources could students use or access? So let's say there are students with limited internet access. Let's say faulty yung internet nila. Diba? So how do we address that? One thing that we can do is to identify yung pinaka-minimum na meetings na kailangan natin gawin with students online for NSTP. So kunyari, meron kayong segment, let's say on reflection or student sharing or may lecture. Lahat naman ng yun scheduled na. So what we have to do first is to ensure na malinaw sa mga students kung kailan lang sila ang kailangan gumamit ng internet, yung bare minimum. Diba? But second is that, as I've mentioned, there are other platforms that can be used offline, or that the input or the preparation required can be done offline. Tapos isang beses ka na lang mag-online. So for example, uploading a YouTube video, hindi kailangan the whole time online ka. Gagawa ka ng video kahit wala kang internet, pwede mo siyang gawin using a camera, using a phone. And then the only time that you actually need internet is when you upload it. So that's an example of being able to use online in a scheduled manner, meaning hindi siya kailangan the whole time, but you can prepare the activities or the outputs of the students while doing it without internet. When I say skills and abilities naman, as I mentioned earlier, maybe there are students who are good at public speaking. Maybe there are students who are good at graphics. It's a matter of being able to tap those existing skills and interests and applying it in the context of learning. Later on, I'll give examples of that. Next slide, please. So the next is in choosing the projects. So pre-selected themes or areas versus student preference. So pag sinabi kong pre-selected themes or areas, you may also opt to identify topic areas or thematic areas that students may want to focus on. So for example, the UP module includes conversations on gender and development. It includes disaster risk reduction and management. It also includes other topics on discovering oneself and others. So, pwede kayo ang mag-set nung scope or nung themes na pwedeng pagpilian ng mga students, or if there is something that they want to dive into, pwede rin yung siyang ibigay na open sa kanila. Next slide, please. So, in the case of student preference, kung gusto nyong i-open yung topic sa kanila, 'di ba? One thing that we can ask the students during lecture portion pa lang is, what issue do you deeply care for or want to know more about? Which can you help address or raise awareness on? So, for example, in your area siguro, there's a student who cares a lot about land use or indigenous communities. Perhaps this is a topic that the student wants to explore or students want to explore and might actually be a good topic for them. Why? Because first of all, mas mataas yung magiging engagement nila if it's a topic na they're passionate about or something na malapit sa kanila. 'Di ba? Another is that because it's a topic that they are passionate about, chances are they've read about it. They have explored researches or further resources on it, or perhaps again this is something that they can really be more hands-on with. So another topic that they can explore, for example, is women empowerment. So some students may want to focus on a project that will allow them to engage with more people or be able to do activities that will help other women in their community or anywhere else in the Philippines. So the value of student preference again is that mas malakas yung investment ng student dun sa topic kasi it's a topic that they personally believe in or are personally involved in. Next slide, please. The third is once they've identified or you have identified topics to cover with them, it would be good to set your agreed on standards and specific criteria and indicators. So kung yung topic is something that you've chosen or your students have chosen, there is still dapat may middle ground pa rin kayo when you set criteria and indicators. And when I say criteria and indicators, there can be some that you as instructors will choose, kumbaga baseline indicators, but it would also be good for you to co-create additional criteria and indicators with students. Why? As I've mentioned, because service learning is about integrating their skills and their interests with public service, a big component of this is treating the students as partners. So because we want this to be more meaningful to them, because we want this to be an opportunity for them to be more hands-on and engaged in their project, maganda yung meron din tayo sigurong 1 to 2 criteria in the grading component that they co-develop with you as instructors. Diba? So, an example of criteria, next slide please, would be identifying what their student learning outcomes are. Ano ba yung gusto nilang maging takeaway? Another thing is, ano ba yung community outcomes? So for example, they've chosen, let's say, being able to raise more awareness on the LGBTQI plus community. Diba? So perhaps in that community, the students can work with you in identifying, okay, what are my success indicators for this project? Because this is a project that I am passionate about. What is my end goal? And how can I ensure that this end goal will be met? So this is something that the student can articulate and craft with their instructors or as a group. Another aspect that I added are teacher/instructor outcomes. Bakit? Siguro doon sa traditional na NSTP natin, hindi natin masyadong dinadagdag yung teacher-instructor outcomes. But as I've mentioned, because we can treat this as a partnership with our students, baka as instructors, meron din tayong gustong matutunan from this experience of switching to remote. Baka meron din tayong gustong matutunan from the advocacies that our students have chosen. So it's optional to add a teacher-instructor outcome, but I think it would really be helpful if the students feel like you are with them in their experience of service learning in an online platform. Next slide, please. So one example of community outcome, for example, is setting the criteria of sustainability. So what do we want to look at? How has this project contributed to the well-being or quality of life of the community involved? And how can this be sustained by the community involved or other stakeholders? So pwedeng future students, yung mga susunod na mag-NSTP, or private citizens. For example, if you work with a school in your hometown or in your area, let's say children, 'di ba? Tutoring children. Kung yung switch nyo from manual to digital is coming up with online materials and tutoring children online as the NSTP of the students, yung mga materials na yon, paano ba sila mas nakatulong doon sa mga tinuturuang mga bata ng mga NSTP students para mas maging maganda yung learning experience nila online. Or itong mga modules na to, how can these modules be used by other students in the future? Or kung ibibigay natin tong modules na to sa kanilang mga school or sa kanilang mga magulang, itong mga modules na to, paano siya mas magiging user-friendly para dun sa mga magulang ng mga batang tuturuan sa NSTP. Next slide, please. And then of course, when we set our criteria, kasama na din yung indicators. So, following our example kanina sa sustainability, kung let's say mag-set tayo ng criteria na sustainability, and by definition, we said we wanted that the target audience has a deeper understanding of the topic. Kahit na na-articulate natin siya ng ganyan, what is important is that ma-breakdown natin siya both in quality and quantity. Pag sinabi nating deeper understanding, ano yung metric natin for that? Ano yung magiging success indicator mo na mas malalim yung pagkakaintindi ng mga bata dun sa topic? So we have to break that down. As I've said, you can opt to do that as the instructor, or you can also encourage students to co-develop with you. Next slide, please. Lastly is in project monitoring. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So earlier I mentioned, diba, selecting your online platforms. Please go, previous slide, please. Previous slide, please. So in selecting your online platforms, sorry, the slide after. Next slide, please. Okay. So, yes, thank you. So, previous slide, please. So, in selecting your online platforms and outputs. So, for example, ang online platform na na-select nyo is Tableau. So, as I mentioned earlier, Tableau is an online platform for data visualization. Let's say, for example, one of the projects that you want the students to work on or the students have decided to work on is monitoring the COVID budget. And they want to be able to help more people in the community understand kung saan ba napupunta yung budget ng LGU sa COVID. So let's say the buong semester, ang ginagawa nila is tinitignan nila yung mga report ng LGU. Tinitingnan nila yung expense reports, tinitingnan nila kung saan napupunta yung budget, para kanino, etc. And one way that they want to help communicate that with the larger community is by transforming that into data materials that are visualized through charts or through other means. So gagamitin na let's say is Tableau. Diba? So Tableau, as I mentioned, also has a public mode. Pag sinabi nating public Tableau, that means that if you upload data online using Tableau, it's visible to everyone. You don't need to have a Tableau account, but that data is now publicly available and can be used by other people. However, what you can also do with that is to transform that data into something that is more understandable or comprehensible for other people. So perhaps you want your students to engage in work that allows them to make communication materials related to that. So, pwede nating gawin is gagawa sila sa Tableau ng project, i-upload nila yung mga findings nung budget expenses ng LGU, and then public Tableau will give you access to view how many views or how many people have accessed or downloaded the report that the students prepared. So as an output indicator, what you can include is, ayun nga, how many views or how many downloads. Next slide, please. So siguro just to concretize it lang, no? One example that I wanted to share is yung sa Citizens Budget Tracker. So the Citizens Budget Tracker is a national initiative by individuals who wanted to see where the government's social amelioration program is being spent and how it's being spent. So itong Citizens Budget Tracker, initial initiative siya ng mga concerned na citizens na gusto nilang makita nasaan ba yung pera ng gobyerno at ano ba yung pinagkakagastusan. So anong ginawa? Yung data na available from different agencies, may mga individuals na familiar sa data science or sa statistics. Ang ginawa nila, itong data na to, in-input nila sa Python. So the first logo that you're seeing at the top right is Python. In-upload nila yon, tinignan nila, minap out nila yung data, and then kinonvert siya into visuals na mas maiintindihan ng general public na walang background sa data using Tableau. Once it was transformed into visuals, as you can see in the picture in the middle, in-upload siya on Facebook. So yung flow na yon, ang mga involved are citizens or individuals with different specializations who wanted other private citizens to understand how government budgeting works. So, this kind of project is individual-led, but can be done by using different available technology. If you want to adopt this in your community or in your respective university, what you can look is a localized budget tracker. Baka sa province nyo, for example, sa Occidental Mindoro o kaya sa Tuguegarao, yung data na available from the LGU, baka gusto nyong i-encourage yung students to come up with their own budget tracker na respective sa Occidental Mindoro or respective sa Tuguegarao, na pwede rin nilang gawin accessible para sa mas madami pang tao doon. Para yung project na yun, mas makatulong siya sa mga gustong makaintindi dun sa proseso ng pagbabudget ng gobyerno. Next slide, please. Another example is Grid Podcasts. So Grid Magazine is an existing platform that converted their technology in podcasts. So gumagawa sila ng podcasts na particular sa tourism in the country, pero also helping people understand the different communities in the Philippines. One of their podcasts was What We Talk About When We Talk About Mindanao. So this particular one is about educating people about the different contexts or the different histories that play within Mindanao. So itong podcast na to, it was recorded offline. You can use a phone and then uploaded. Available siya sa Apple Podcasts or even sa Spotify. Parehong free. So you might want your students to engage in projects that allow them to talk about topics that are in your respective areas that they can share nationwide or to a wider audience. Lastly, my last example is on TikTok. So madami siguro sa atin iniisip TikTok is usually panglibangan, entertainment platform, but did you know that TikTok can also be an educational platform? So one example that I gave here is Studio Syra. So Syra is an architect. What she does is to use TikTok as a platform to educate people about architecture, to give people backgrounds on different architectural techniques and design. So, kumbaga, mas pinapaintindi niya sa wider audience kung ano yung architecture and ano yung mga different techniques in architecture. So isang binigay ko na example here is what are the different design stages in architecture. This particular video has 199,000 views. Itong measure of views can be used as a tool to monitor. And then you can also see from below, pwede ring comments. So if your concern is monitoring yung mga projects ng students, for every online platform that you choose, they have their own set of metrics na pwede nyong gamitin para i-apply as part of measuring the success of the projects of your students. So far, those are the examples that I wanted to share. And that's the coverage of my topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ana Maria Raimundo. Now, I would like to remind everyone, of course, we welcome all your questions and inquiries. However, in light of the time that we are very particular about, we will be entertaining first the questions posted during the registration. And if we still have more time, the questions that you have posted in the Q&A and as well as other questions that are in the YouTube will be entertained, and this will be collated. And those are the common questions will be put together, and hopefully we have time to address your questions, and this will be given to our resource persons. Thank you very much. Okay, so as we continue with Lecture 3 on group work and assessment in an online setting, we'd like to welcome again Dr. Ria May Borromeo.
Hello again. So my next topic will be about assessment and evaluation for online group work. These are the things that I will cover: online collaboration tools, offline collaboration tools, group work monitoring, and group work assessment. So when there is a group work, one of the, if not the most important thing, is the communication. How can we collaborate if we are not able to communicate? That is something that we really need, the communication. So in the first two topics, I will talk about communication channels. In online collaboration tools, the main communication channel is the internet. And online collaboration tools are quite easy to use. Maybe you have been used to using these things in the past, like Google Drive, Docs, Sheets, Slides, wherein you and your collaborators can contribute and work synchronously on documents and share files as well. There is also this overleaf wherein you can write. It's also like a Google Docs and also Dropbox, like Google Drive, and video conferencing tools such as this, Zoom, wherein we can talk and share information and plan our meetings through Zoom, Skype, Google Hangouts Meet, or Microsoft Teams. Now, when we say online, sometimes we're not always online. We're just sometimes online. Like, for example, if your internet is only good for, you have prepaid internet and you have limited internet access, uh, when in those cases, you can still use some of these things like Google Drive, Docs, Sheets, because they have offline versions. However, there are delays in the communication when you are not always online. But for video conferencing tools, this requires you, because these are synchronous tools, to be online at the same time. Like you and your collaborator should be online at the same time. Oh, I forgot to add here, we still have the email, the good old email, and messaging, like messaging through data such as Messenger, Google Hangouts, or chatting through, what else? Yahoo Messenger. No, it doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, you get the idea that these communication channels are very useful for online collaboration. Now, the more challenging one is offline collaboration. I saw in the questions here that some are asking like how can we do group work when we don't have internet? And this is very, very challenging in my opinion, but it also gives us room for creativity. So, since communication is the most important thing in the group work or in collaboration, these are the three things that I thought of that we can use to collaborate without the internet. So we can make use of the good old um, landline or mobile phone. Some mobile phones already accept teleconferencing like with many participants, but if that's not possible, you can call one person, your first group mate, and then your first group mate can call the second group mate. So we can be creative in disseminating the information and communicating. And then also there's the SMS, the text messaging. You can also use this. Here we can have group chats even through SMS. Now, if we don't have that, we can still have the snail mail. This is really I know that I know that it's difficult, but for example, you can use this at the beginning of the project. You divide the tasks to the among your group mates, and then there you assign one person to collate everything, or and then your group mates will just send to one person, and then that one person will compile everything and then submit to the teacher. Now, this is not ideal, I know, because it's so much work, but um, I'm just saying that somehow we can still make this work, although it's not very easy. And maybe you have other suggestions, or maybe you already are doing some offline collaboration among yourselves. It will be nice to hear those as well. As I said earlier, that when there is the internet, everything is easier, la- even in monitoring group work. These things that I'm presenting here, they are all via the internet. Like you can monitor the group work using the learning management systems. For example, in Moodle, in UPOU, we're using Moodle, so um, I'm more used to this learning management system. I also use Google Classroom in some of my classes, but our primary learning management system is Moodle, and it has built-in features for setting up groups. So I can create groups, and then I can only um, show some material